Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the interaction with viewers through the comment section and the loyal watchers who have followed us through over 200 episodes in this long-running, at this point, OOTP series. Looking forward to the new version of the game, OOTP 25, in a few months. But until then, we've got work to do with these Buffalo Wings. And this upcoming season is an absolute win-now season for the Buffalo Wings. We have just been bumped to $256 million budget after our market size bumped up again to above average. And given that we did, after we got that bump to the highest budget that we've ever had in the game, have an ownership change to an owner who is focused on profit and an economizer, I think it's very realistic to think that the $256 million we have for this upcoming season will be the biggest budget that we ever have. And it's certainly conceivable to me that we could be seeing a 20, 25, maybe even a $30 million decrease in our budget next season. Unless we win another championship. Certainly that boosted profitability this year, which our new owner is concerned about. So with a big budget and a team coming off of a championship, we're in win now mode. Only $18 million available at this point, but that was driven by three key decisions that we made before free agency started today. First was bringing back our longtime ace, current number 2 starter, Alexis Barajas, who had opted out of his contract, signed him to a 4-year, $88 million deal with a team option for the final season there. So good to have him back. Unfortunately, we will be moving on from starting pitcher Eric Barbarito. We did make a qualifying offer to him, so hopefully we'll get some draft pick compensation when he signs. We made a decision to bring back Josh Porter. We signed him to a 3-year deal worth up to $50 million, but it's really a 2-year deal, and then he's got a player option for the final season at $18 million. Similar to the situation with our pitchers, though, we brought back one of the 2 key players that was possibly leaving, and it's a similar story with the position players where our our medium-term first baseman, Daniel Rojas, who just completed a 4-year, $120 million deal, led the team in homers and ribbies last year, and we decided to move on from him. He is in his late 30s at this point, preferred to invest the money that we had into Mr. Porter. And then we also made a trade, which was certainly a win-now trade, and that was bringing on who will be a shortstop for us, Damani Essien. He's been a perennial Gold Glover at second base, and but a few years ago, third base. During his career, almost 32 years old now. That 70 infield range is the best of any of our infielders. He is not a perfect defensive shortstop, but he's better than what we've had. He's durable in terms of his injury proneness, and over the course of his career, he's been a close to league average offensive player. Although, to be fair, since he's turned 30, he's had 2 consecutive seasons that he has been below average as far as his offensive production. But given that we are a win-now team that's also focused a bit on pitching and defense, strengthening our shortstop position defensively was something that we felt made sense. So he is making pretty good money. We did fortunately get the Marlins to retain 20% of his contract. He can opt out after this year, which may not be the end of the world if Josh Fuchs, the young shortstop in our system, is ready to go. But for a win-now team, we felt like Essien was a pretty good upgrade overall at shortstop, good solid upgrade defensively, and think we could conceivably get a little more production offensively out of him than we did from Mike Whitehead a year ago. So we're spending a fair amount of the boosted budget that we do have available on Essien as well. You can see we've got a little over $18 million available, so we're probably not going to be major players in the first month or 2 of free agency, but it is conceivable if there's some interesting players on the market come February and March. we could look to supplement our team with a one-year deal. We've made a few offers to minor league players to bolster our minor league system. And then, as some of you have noted in the comments, we did make an offer to Daniel Aguayo Leal, 23-year-old out of Cuba. We only have average scouting accuracy on him. Made a minor league with major league option, $1.8 million contract to him. Not a lot of speed, not the greatest personality except for his strong work ethic, and not anything more than a barely competent corner outfielder. But he does have a bat that we think could be pretty interesting, and he's a switch hitter. So given that it's not an insane amount of money, we made an initial offer to him. It's conceivably comes back to us in the next couple weeks and says, I've got a better offer from someone else, or I want a fully guaranteed major league contract. If and when he does that, hopefully we'll have an updated scouting report on him by the time that occurs, and we'll be able to decide whether we want to proceed with continued discussions with him. And with that kind of level setting out of the way, we'll probably focus on a few things in this episode. I don't expect us to be real active at the top end of the free agent market, as I already said. And we've got the winter meetings coming up in the Rule 5 draft. We've got, as usual for a farm system that's been as productive of ours, several players that we may need to be adding to the 40-man roster. So while we're in the process of scouting international amateur free agents, while we're in the process of scouting international free agents, we're also in the progress of scouting all of our Rule 5 players right now to make sure we've got a good view on them before the Rule 5 draft takes place. The most notable person who will certainly be adding to the 40-man roster will be Juan Toledo, number 16 prospect in baseball, a guy who was a big international free agent signing for us almost 6 years ago, and finally made it to Double-A this past year. He is a strikeout machine. Whether he can overcome his inability to swing the bat and make consistent contact with the ball is going to ultimately determine whether he is a big-time offensive player in the majors or a guy who was kind of fighting to hold on to a roster spot. But still feel there's some good potential here with the fact that his contact, gap power, and home run power could all be well above average. He's got good speed, pretty solid outfield range, high adaptability, and work ethic. The concerns are the number of walks he's going to draw being a bit low, and the number of strikeouts that he generates being exceptionally high. Hopefully he can improve that avoid strikeouts rating. He's also fragile in terms of his injury proneness, but that is what it is. But Toledo will certainly be going on to the 40-man, and then Joey Bills, another pretty solid prospect, number 37 in baseball. He'll certainly be added. I don't even know why I'm waiting for scouting reports on those two. Toledo and Bills both certainly will be on the 40-man, and then we've got some other interesting decisions. R.E. Caper is a guy that some of you have commented on with his three-pitch arsenal and lack of control, but decent stuff and potentially exceptional movement. He could be an important part of our bullpen or possibly our rotation down the line. Don't have a ton of real low-end talent on our 40-man roster at this point, but would like to keep at least one spot open for when we head into the Rule 5 draft in a few weeks. So we're going to have some interesting decisions to make because there are some other good players. Chad Aguirre is a reliever that we picked in the third round back in 2040. Certainly looks like he could be a solid left-hander out of the bullpen. Not a top-notch prospect, but also someone we'd prefer not to lose in a perfect world. So we're going to have some interesting decisions to make as far as who else to possibly add to the 40-man roster. And maybe we'll look to make a trade or two over the next few weeks of some of the guys on the lower end of our 40-man roster to open up a few spots. And we've simmed ahead a couple weeks to the start of the winter meetings. We did just get some feedback from Aguayo Leal. Says he's looking for more money. And we also got our scouting report on him back today, which is good. High accuracy now, and we still see him as a 5-star potential player. Really good bat, not much speed, mediocre defense, mixed personality, generally negative. But for a switch hitter with that batting profile at 23 years old, still a pretty interesting player. We'll see exactly what he says he's looking for now. He says he's looking for the same thing as before, a minor league contract, which becomes a guaranteed 1-year major league contract if promoted. So we'll meet that demand and submit that offer, but that's what we had given him before, so we'll just try to keep the discussions going. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to giving him a guaranteed major league contract for $1.5 million to $2.5 million, paying him more than the major league minimum. But if that would guarantee that we could get him into our system, could be an interesting player to help us down the line when we eventually do move on from the likes of Luis Coma-Duran. And first baseman Daniel Rojas has officially moved on, $24 million a year for 3 years with the Mariners. As we've talked about with him, very productive during the 4 years he was with us, but as a 38-year-old, even though he's coming off of the best season he had with us with a 157 WRC plus 39 homers and 103 ribbies, just felt like we wanted to invest the money in a younger player like Porter, as well as open up some opportunities for some of our younger first base / outfielder type guys to get more playing time. And fortunately, with the interest crashing, even with Rojas' departure, still have fan interest at 100 or higher at this point. So hopefully we'll be able to handle the pending departure of Eric Barbarito as well, and maybe supplement fan interest a little bit as the free agent period moves on in the coming weeks and months. And we've made it now to the Rule 5 draft. We did make one minor trade just to get a couple of players off of the 40-man roster, and ended up supplementing it by adding a few younger guys to the 40-man. So we only have one spot. I think it's conceivable we may lose a player or two in the Rule 5 as well, but we've made our decisions at this point. We've got to live with them. We'll likely look, as I said, to add one player in the Rule 5 draft, which will round out the 40-man roster for the time being. And there's two pitchers we're going to consider taking here. You can see some familiar names: Ben Borgian, Austin Britz, Robbie Farrell, all guys who have been part of our organization, and in a couple of those cases on our major league team at times in the past, who are available. But we're going to go with a little bit younger potential prospects. One is Dan Way, 24-year-old right-hander out of the White Sox organization. Was promoted all the way from high A ball to the majors late last year. And he was pretty darn effective with 27 strikeouts in 18 2/3 innings. His stuff is exceptional, a great slider and a very good fastball. The only question is him with his control. He's also got a really good sinker, some positive personality traits, throws in the mid-90s. Certainly would be in the mix to be one of the guys at the back end of our bullpen, and he maybe has potential to become a setup man or even a stopper or a closer for us down the line. The other guy that I'm interested in is Doug Goheen. Not as high end of a prospect, I don't think. Also throws in the mid-90s. Also made his major league debut last year with the Blue Jays, where he was also pretty effective, 16 strikeouts in 13 1/3 innings, only allowed 7 hits in a 2.02 ERA. BABIP against him was only 200, so would certainly expect that to normalize. Not as high-end a prospect. His top end of his pitches is not quite as high, but he is a lefty, and he's also pretty effective against left-handed batters, particularly with that really good movement on his pitches. So I'm intrigued by both of them, given that we potentially have 3 lefties already in the bullpen in Warner, Ruckel, and Hale. As much as I think Goheen may be a small upgrade from the likes of Warner and Hale, I really like Way's potential. If he gets that under control, so to speak, with the stuff he has in that slider, fastball, sinker combination, I think he could be a really useful reliever for many years to come. So we're going to go ahead and draft Dan Way with the 1 pick that we're going to have in this Rule 5 draft. And we did end up losing a couple of younger players in the later rounds of the Rule 5 draft. Daniel Vera, decent young outfielder, just never really had an opportunity with us. You can see he spent the last 2.5 years in Albany. Pretty productive with a combined 60 homers there the last 2 years, hit over 300 every year at that level. We're just so stacked in the outfield that for a guy who's almost 26 years old, who is competent defensively, not that fast, he was never going to be anything more than a 5th outfielder for us, if that. And we also lost Eric Morris. May remember him. He is a guy that, when did we, we just actually signed him to a minor league contract. I thought he had been with us earlier, but I guess not. Must be confusing him with someone else, but he's also an older player, 29-year-old, elbow ligament reconstruction surgery, so maybe they stash him on their 60-man IL in the Diamondbacks organization, but not a big-time member of our future, even though he is a left-handed reliever. And the new year is upon us. Mr. Aguayo Leal favors our offer, supposedly. We have gotten another scouting report back on him, so very high scouting accuracy, and still see him as a pretty high-end hitter, particularly if he can avoid the strikeouts. So certainly would not mind bringing the switch hitter into our organization. We'll see how the offer we've made to him ends up being resolved. Eric Barbarito has also finally moved on. $19.4 million a year for 5 years. So the compensation for him is a supplemental first-round pick. So that'll require us to perhaps put a little bit extra money aside, with the fact we'll basically be getting an extra late first-round pick for him in the upcoming draft. So still haven't done much of anything other than the Rule 5 in terms of adding players, but we do have money available. A lot of the big names have signed at this point. Taking a look at the top free agents who are available, certainly in terms of potential, Aguayo Leal stands out. Steve Anderson, Bobby Bolig, Tim Gaglia, Tyreek Hardage, Mitch Houlihan, among others, familiar names that are on the free agent market as far as batters. Pitching wise, a little more there as far as the relievers, including David Rivera, who we traded away a year ago, who ended up being a key cog in the series of trades that ultimately led us to add Mr. Reichert, who we're planning on having our first baseman for the next decade or so. Matthew Wenzel, familiar left-handed name, who was in our bullpen available, but don't necessarily think there's any difference makers for us still out there at this point as far as the pitchers, but certainly a Jeremy Grimes, a David Rivera probably would be the 2 most interesting to us if they happen to linger on the market for a bit longer and their price tags come down a bit. And Rivera is now off the market. He signed a $6.4 million a year deal over 2 years to stay with the Rockies. So one less option for us. Don't feel too bad missing out on him, as good a reliever as he is. Feel like our pitching staff is still pretty strong. Don't know that we necessarily need him. So we're only a few days left from the beginning of the international amateur free agent signing period at this point. So we'll continue to do some final scouting, and then we'll kind of discuss the top players available before we finish off this episode, and leave those of you who are inclined to opine on what we should do in IAFA, give you an opportunity to do that. And Mr. Aguayo Leal has reached back out to us to now say that he prefers an offer from Chicago. It says he's also looking at Boston. Still says he's only looking for a $1.8 million minor league contract, which becomes a guaranteed major league contract if promoted. But we've offered him that twice at this point. So given that I think he's an interesting player, I think I might just offer him a pure major league contract. We'll still have 3 option years with him. And I know we'll end up paying more than the major league minimum for us these next 3 years. But he's a good enough prospect that I'm willing to see if maybe that will get things done. We'll offer him the $1.8 million that he's looking for, but with a major league contract. We've got the money to do it, and honestly, it works out well for us because then we don't have to worry about him opting out after 30 days. And if he develops the way that we hope, we've got his rights for the foreseeable future. The issue is that our 40-man roster is full right now, so we'll probably have to make a corresponding trade or release somebody to make room for him. But willing to consider that given that Aguayo Leal's ceiling seems reasonably high, and he's willing to think about that major league contract offer from us. And we finally made it to the start of the international amateur free agent signing period. So we'll take a quick look at some of the more interesting prospects out there. Kind of a down year for pitching. Frank Aguirre is one of the 2 players we've focused on scouting throughout the last 4 months. Like his personality, he's a left-hander who looks like he could be a useful major leaguer out of the bullpen. He's got the stamina to start. If that curve and knuckle curve both develop, he could have a 3-pitch arsenal and be a interesting major leaguer. Kind of like him. And he's not looking for very much money at this point, so he might be a guy that we can wrap up relatively economically. Juan Estrada is another starting pitching prospect, right-hander. Going to be reliant on probably the fastball, slider, and sinker developing because although he's working on a change, we don't see it being very effective. Good personality with high adaptability and work ethic. Looks like he could be a useful back end of the rotation starter or right-handed arm out of the bullpen. A little older at over 18 years old. Sergio Cisneros is the guy that we've had in our most recent camps. Like his high work ethic, he's another left-hander, durable, has good stamina, but see him as only a 2-pitch guy, so think he could be a useful left-handed arm out of the bullpen. Also not looking for a ton of money, and league interest in him is very low. We've got high scouting accuracy in all of those guys. We'll look quickly at a couple of the other higher regarded left-handed pitching prospects and talk about why we didn't spend a lot of time on them. David Gurriskieta, just don't like the low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic combo. He's a left-handed arm, but with the personality quirks, didn't see him as any more interesting than an Aguirre or a Cisneros. David Valley, similar situation, low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic. Another left-hander. I guess you could argue that these guys' ceilings are a bit higher than certainly Cisneros and possibly also Aguirre. But given that I do like to kind of focus on guys with better personalities to maximize their chances of reaching whatever we think their potential is. And Gurriskieta and Valle, we're also looking for 2 of the bigger numbers in terms of their demand among the pitchers in this year's pool of international amateur free agents. Although I did scout them a little more aggressively in the early stages of this, have not had either of them in camp for a couple of months now. Turning to the batters, and there's a little more high-end talent here. We'll start with one of the more lightly regarded players, not looking for a ton of money, league interest, only average in Austin Bashford. Shortstop out of Australia. The question with him is his bat. Has a glove where he could play multiple positions in the infield, not necessarily at a gold glove level, but not at a embarrassing or incompetent level either. Ton of real positive personality traits that he brings to the table. Probably not going to be a first focus of ours, but if we've got a few $100,000 left and he's still on the market, could be a guy that we look to add later down the line. We've also been scouting another shortstop, Juan Adame, like the glove with the 70 range, similar to Bashford. The question with him is whether he's going to hit enough to become a major leaguer. But Adame also not looking for a ton of money, and we've got a very strong relationship with him, so could be a guy to supplement in. Then we'll also take a look at all the 3-star and higher prospects. The two that we have not had in camp, third baseman Alejandro Medina, looks like a competent bat, a competent glove, but no speed and just the low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic. Didn't really want to waste a lot of time investigating him. Luis Cedillo, kind of generic corner outfield bat. Could be useful if he fully develops that 60 home run power, but looking for almost $2 million was just not someone we invested a lot of time inviting to our camps. The last of the 3-star potential prospects, Sergio de Aces, a catcher, decent catcher ability, high work ethic and intelligence, and a potentially decent bat for a catcher. Not a horrible guy to think about, but he's looking for pretty decent money. League interest in him is also pretty high. And then there's the top 4 prospects, including Arrigo Montelongo, first baseman. Looks like he could be a pretty interesting bat. Doesn't bring anything to the table defensively. In fact, when I looked into his ratings, he may have the worst defensive profile I've ever seen in terms of a position player. He's basically incompetent everywhere defensively, but if he really develops 75 contact and 60 home run power, he could be a pretty interesting hitter. Luis Luna, a 16-year-old right fielder, potentially 65 home run power, competent defensive corner outfielder. Not the most exciting prospect in the world. Probably not someone we'll go after. We do have a very strong relationship with him, though. And then right fielder David Aguiar, pretty well-balanced hitting profile. Like his durability, like some of the personality traits, but just a competent-ish defensive outfielder. Does have a nice mustache, though. And then the top prize, at least according to our scouts' view of player potential, is the catcher Vincent Blasquez, 16-year-old out of Panama. Not much in terms of his defensive ability as a catcher, but with the potential 65 contact, 75 home run power, and 65 eye, probably the best upside in terms of his bat. Unfortunately, he does have a low work ethic, so question whether he's really going to reach that full potential. But Blasquez defensively, is 6'2", could play him at first base. If the bat fully develops, he could also certainly be a DH who could catch for you or play first base in a pinch. So an interesting prospect, not surprisingly, looking for $2 million. He's looking for one of the bigger figures out there. So we've got some interesting decisions to make. I'll highlight just one other catcher, Sergio Andrade, since he's looking for $2.6 million, which is more than anybody. Does have some positive personality traits, but below average catcher ability and borderline interesting-ish potential as a hitter. 16 years old. He is durable. I just don't know that I'd be interested in Andrade because the bat isn't special enough to make me willing to bring him on board, whereas Velasquez if he can overcome the low work ethic and really develop to what we think his ceiling is, he's pretty interesting. And then Sergio de Ases is probably the one I'm most interested in, just because he can actually play the position. He's got the high work ethic and intelligence and a competent bat. So going to be some interesting decisions to make. Not necessarily in love with anybody. I honestly like some of the lower end prospects like Adame and Bashford among the batters, and quite honestly Aguirre and Cisneros, the two lefties, among the pitchers. But I certainly, even if I were to go after all four of those players, at least with the money that they claim they're looking for, feel like there's money to invest in one of these other offensive players at least from the start. So definitely have some interesting options. If you have any thoughts on which direction you would go faced with this opportunity set, always helpful for me to hear those. And until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.